Releasing the victim mentality. Why do we want to talk about this? Why is this important? One of the great challenges is if we find ourselves feeling like we're a victim all the time, our life literally goes in circles and we never get out of it. The problem with the victim mentality is it's self-perpetuating. And something happens and we see ourselves as a victim and we can't do anything about it. And then something else happens and we can't do anything about it. So we always stay circling the same thing. And it's like the same nothing. It's the same boogeyman or something. It's this weird thing that I can't get out of. And then all of a sudden, our life just becomes this perpetual drama. Every single thing becomes a drama and we can't get out. And life isn't about just circling the drain. We actually want to accomplish things. We want to experience this soul. We want to manifest ourselves out in the world. And we can't do it if we find ourselves stuck in a vicious cycle. And the victim mentality is a vicious cycle. So the first thing I want to talk about is that the victim mentality is not questioning whether or not anything bad has ever happened to us, right? We're not saying that we weren't abused as a child, and we're not saying that we weren't sort of victimized or whatever we want to call it. Our language is very, very circled, almost designed around this idea. And it's not to say that our last partner wasn't a narcissist. It's not to say that we haven't had toxic relationships or we have issues with our parents. It's not that things haven't happened to us. We're not questioning that, but we are questioning how we interpret it. What is our perspective on what happened? That's the question. And those are two different things, right? It's sort of that difference between pain and suffering. We can experience a lot of pain, but whether or not we suffer because of it, and again, I'm not talking about your leg is ripped off and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about we have an experience. Are we able to step forward out of that experience? Or does this brain and this frontal cortex that's designed for imagination, creation, manifestation, and all these wonderful things, does this frontal cortex take that pain and create a story out of it that we now are going to play out? And whatever that story is, the curious thing about this frontal cortex of ours, this part of the brain, the problem with it is the story it makes, it's almost by design you're not allowed out. Because in the story, you are the victim. And the problem is the brain gets this attachment to being the victim. And that's what makes us stuck. Right? So we talked about the drama triangle in past talks, which is what's inspired this talk. The drama triangle is when we see every person in our life either as a victim, normally us, not always though, a victim, the persecutor, or the savior. And this drama triangle we have seen played out in our lives our whole life. Literally from childhood roadrunner, and the coyotes chasing the roadrunner and all that kind of thing, or we watch Disney movies and there's always Snow White, there's the evil witch, and then there's the prince that saves her. This dynamic is constant, right? It's this constant thing that there's always an innocent person, and if we are stuck in the victim mentality, that's who we identify with, right? Not everybody identifies in the victim space. Lots of people identify in the savior space. I've never met anyone that identifies as the persecutor, but a lot of people, especially in the spiritual world, identify in the savior mentality because we love saving people. And again, I think it speaks to a natural desire to help, the natural desire to simply meet a need and protect those who need protection and all that in a very healthy way. That's not drama, right? If someone falls in the water and you jump in and save them, there's no drama there. You simply saved somebody from drowning. And then you go back to your life and you're just a person again. You're not perpetually going out looking for people to save from drowning, because that's, now we're attached to being it. Now we're attached to the juice, right? The, oh yeah, the adrenaline of saving people. It's so exciting. So we can easily get caught in the savior mentality in the drama triangle. But again, if we're stuck in the savior mentality, we're stuck in the same drama as the others, because now we're telling the stories from the savior perspective. Oh, you wouldn't believe it. And they were going through all this stuff and we talked about it and da 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 da. And even if we don't admit it, if we're kind of always having to be the savior, it's a bit of a challenge. So if we find ourselves telling stories, you know, well, you wouldn't believe what that person did to that person, so I stepped in and, you know, kind of thing. So got to be careful there too. But what's really interesting about this, when we place ourselves as that innocent one in the Disney movie, in the Hollywood movie, and this person hurt this person, what's interesting is, as the viewer of the movie, who are we supposed to identify with? Right? Who's the star of the show? The victim. Right? We watch them. Maybe they struggle. Maybe they had a difficult childhood. Maybe they have addiction issues. Maybe they have something. But for some reason, the story is written so that we can identify with the person who's struggling. And then we slowly watch the redemption of the human spirit, right? We watch them rise up to that place of courage and their life changes and whatever, right? So we're actually trained to identify with the person who's been hurt. And so and I'm just saying all this because if you find yourself being the person who's sort of stuck in the drama triangle, to not be too hard on ourselves about it, right? Because when we learn these things, and we have been watching them since we were children, every Disney movie has this. And very often, unfortunately, the person who is the heroine, it's very often feminine, it's very often a woman, she doesn't actually sort it out. She waits for Prince Charming to save her, right? It's like, you know, the Cinderella story, one of my favorite movie versions of it is, what's the one with Drew Barrymore? What's it called? Wow, it was right on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, there's a Cinderella story based on, and Drew Barrymore is the Cinderella character. Ever After. Yes, thank you. And of course, there is a Prince Charming and there is an evil witch, her stepmother, but she saves herself. Nobody else saves her. She saves herself. And she wins the guy. And this is really important. This is really important for our talk today, because if we find ourselves in that position, we have to be our own savior, right? And we also have to accept the persecutor inside of us that's causing us to not believe in ourselves and to not believe that we can make change and to believe that we deserve this somehow, right? We do play a role in the victim mentality. I'm not saying at all that if you were abused as a child, you chose it, blah, 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 all that stuff. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a perspective on events that have happened, right? So just to be really clear, in our perspective, we play a role. And this is really, really important. This drama triangle, because this is a lot of how we're going to get out of this victim mentality, is to deconstruct this drama triangle and get out. And the number one reason, why do we circle in this drama triangle? Well, it's the same reason that the movies use the drama triangle to lure us in. Because the hit we get from drama is a drug. It is so exciting. It's exciting to be mad. It's exciting to be self-righteous. It's exciting to be in pain. And that sounds horrible. But there's a feeling of aliveness in it, right? In many ways, this world is very weird. That we've been sort of drugged into some kind of comfortable coma state, Pleasantville thing. And there was a song and they said, I bleed just to know I'm alive. It's a really weird thing to say that, oh, well, I like it. It's not that I like it, but I feel alive. And because the world has been so wired into this drama triangle, we don't even know how to live without it. We don't know how to have excitement and how to feel alive and how to feel all that invigoration inside of us without it. And I remember, years ago, I was counseling a couple. And, they'd been working on some stuff and they'd been trying to work on things with each other and whatever. And then I'm watching them and I'm realizing they're like picking at each other. They're almost like poking each other with their words, even though they'd done all this work to heal. There was betrayal, there was all this stuff, there was anger, there was all this stuff, and they'd actually done a lot of work, and then they started poking at each other. And at the time I was studying David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force. And lots of you guys are super familiar with this from previous talks. And in Power versus Force, he has this levels of consciousness that we live in. And there's this point right in the center, this level of consciousness called courage, which is also very important to our talk today. Everything below courage, shame, guilt, anger, grief, desire, pride, all these things, these are all the emotions of the drama triangle, right? And it's almost like we have been trained our whole life, not only by Hollywood and Harlequin romances and every other book, but also from our own family experience, what we've witnessed in our families. We are so accustomed to this drama triangle, almost that's what life is. That's where the juice is. Because how often do you ever watch a movie that's simply uplifting without a drama triangle? Can you imagine an exciting movie about being human with no bad guy and no savior? What would that even look like? Right? It's kind of beyond our comprehension because our whole mentality, almost all of our language is all in this who did it, who helped, who's suffering, all this stuff. We're just like caught down here. Right? So I'm sitting with this couple and I'm realizing that without all the drama, it's like they didn't even know how to connect. It's like now they were bored. It's like they had all this negative stuff and the negative stirred up a certain kind of alive juice inside of them. They fixed all the stuff. Then they got to this flat line at courage. And here's the weird thing about courage. So you're sitting in courage and there's no drama. You're not angry and it's nobody else's fault. But you need to take a step forward. And I realized in that moment, sitting with that couple, that we don't know how to live above the line of courage. We don't know how to find the thrill of building something, of expressing ourselves, of creation, right? The drama triangle cheats us of the journey of creation because we're so busy circling the drain, we're not actually creating new things and building mountains and manifesting our dreams. Like the drama triangle cheats us of our entire life path because we're busy just circling and circling and circling. So as soon as we come to courage, now of course how courage pops us out of the drama triangle is courage says, I have choice. And I can make a different choice. Now what happens to this circle? And you make a different choice, now you're over here. Right? One tiny different choice will shift everything. And that's what courage does. But the problem with courage is, and the challenge with courage is, there's no drama. There's no stories to tell. I can't tell you how this person hurt me or how that person, it's their fault that I'm not living the life I want to live. Everything's on me. Everything's back in my court. If I want to do something in my life, I do it. And I step forward in that courage. And I can't tell any stories anymore because those stories just hold us back. They just keep pushing us back into the drama circuit, into that cycle. And there's nothing we can do then. So it was really interesting. So again, to this couple, what would a fun relationship look like without drama? What would you do together? How do they interact in a way that's equally exciting without makeup sex? You know? Without having to apologize, without having to make the other person wrong, without reliving your parents' relationships or every movie you've ever watched. And this is something that, we'll talk a little bit about. But I think as a society, we all have to really sit with it ourselves in our own meditative state and sit there and say, what would that look like? What would I do differently in my life if I couldn't tell my old stories anymore? If I could start fresh in a state of courage and walk forward, how would I get the same juice? Right? And this is so much about this power of joy, right? What is fun? The weird thing about our world is we've relegated fun things to like weekends or things I do when I'm drunk or crazy things or hobbies, but they're not that important. They're just what you do when you have time after a day's work or whatever. What if joy is the whole point of being alive? To actually manifest things because it's fun and it's interesting and it excites your whole being. It's the same thing so I'm writing a book right now. I can so get lost in the overwhelm of this 300-page manuscript I'm trying to, massage out. And if I go into it with that perspective, and I'm doing it to myself, right? I'm my own boss. And I can be all like, I'm never going to get this done. It's stressing me out. I'm like so freaked out. But then every so often I take a deep breath and I think, Katrina, it's no big deal. Just do it. And it's like I breathe deeply and all of a sudden I just write. And I remember how much I love word crafting, how much I love writing, how much I love seeing things appear on the page and disappearing and the flow of words. And I love that. It's so much joy. But all it is a shift of perspective. I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm just looking at it completely different. So instead of having that frustration inside that drives me to the chocolate or whatever it is that I want to indulge in, I have to find the thrill of word crafting. I have to find the thrill of mining something from inside of me or something from above and putting it on paper, right? It's a much more subtle thrill, but it is a thrill, and we need to personally ask ourselves, what would a relationship with another person look like above the line? No drama. What would my life look like above the line? No drama. And it's an important question to actually be able to visualize that. Years ago, I read a book called Meditation Saved My Life. And it was written by, I believe it was a Rinpoche, like a Lama, Tibetan Lama. And when Tibet was taken over by the Chinese, he was taken into custody and tortured. And later he escaped or was left free or something. And he was exiled to the United States. And in Manhattan, there's a hospital specifically for victims of torture. And he was allowed to be there. And so his leg, he had huge issues because his leg is what was tortured. And it was like gangrene, and it was really, really bad. And so he was in there, and the doctor at one point asked him, all right, can you tell us the story? Tell us what they did to you. Tell us about the torture. And he was kind of just joking about it. He was like, oh, well, and he was just very light about the whole thing. So, of course, they're like, signing him up for psychiatric assessment because there's something wrong. Because he could also tell that they were really upset and they were really intense about it. And he kind of wanted to lighten the mood. And so they were like, so then they started analyzing him and saying, well, I think you must be in with denial, right? Because you're not admitting to yourself the horrors that you've been through. And this Lama, he's just sitting there looking at them thinking, what are you talking about? And this is the interesting thing about perspective, because in his worldview, there are no victims, no persecutors, no saviors. That perspective, it's just a worldview, isn't in his. So he didn't see himself as a victim. Did somebody torture him? Yeah. But to him, the person torturing him, if there was a victim, he said it was him. He said, I'm sitting here in Manhattan getting help and, going on with my life. They're still back there stuck in that space. Their life is a living hell. And he's like, so it's an interesting thing to imagine that, okay, so this person did something to this person, but that's it. And when we interpret the experiences of our life without this drama triangle, imagine how different it is, right? So for example, even if we go into, like, torture's pretty bad, but even if, one of our parents sexually abused us, we think, well, that's definitely a victim triangle, right? And it's like, well, I was a child. My father is a pedophile, right? So what's going to happen? But it would have happened to anybody. It wasn't just me. The problem isn't me. The problem was that my dad was a pedophile. Or if I was in a toxic relationship, my partner has real anger issues. So of course, obviously, what's going to happen when you're with someone who has anger issues? They have to be angry at somebody. But how we perceive it is so different, because they're not in control of us. They have serious mental issues that they cannot control themselves, almost like a 2-year-old child, out of control. And they're even violent, right? So you can almost feel like our brain's like, no, this is a drama triangle. It's like, no, it doesn't change whether someone harmed another person. It's all about how do we perceive it? Do we perceive that this person is a violent person and they're violent to everyone? And we got in the way of them, not on purpose or not our fault. And again, it takes away all this fault and blame and everything else. And it looks at the real problem, that this person is a pedophile, or this person has anger issues, or this person has violent tendencies, or this person's not safe. Period. Like, that's the whole story. And if I have wounds that need healing, then I have wounds that need healing. That has nothing to do with that person that harmed me, right? It's that connection, maintaining the connection in the triangle, that it's like they keep wounding us, right? If we identify with that person who harmed us, if they somehow are part of our story, it's like they get to keep playing it out over and over and over again. You know, let's say you have issues with your parents. Lots of families are crazy. I'd almost want to say all families, but that's not probably true. And so the likelihood of us having issues with our parents is high. But what if we just look at our parents as individuals? We look at our parent and say, well, my mom really struggled to love. She struggles to show love. She struggles to feel attachment. She maybe struggled to even have children. That this wasn't really even what she ever really wanted. She wasn't really wired for kids. And so as a child, I definitely didn't feel a lot of love from her. Like, do you feel how cold that feels? Like, it almost feels inhuman to tell the story that way, because there's no drama. There's no reason to pity someone, because hurt people, right? So it's a very, very interesting thing to be able to tell the story without any drama. And what it does is it cuts the strings from the people who hurt us. So why do we end up stuck in the victim triangle? One of the most intimate ones, is that it's modeled for us at home. Again, we've lived in a very difficult world where we could easily tell the story of being victimized by the government, by the church, by the schools, like all that. 100%. The masculine feminine dynamic has been so incredibly distorted and toxic for millennia. I mean, it's the foundation of my whole new book, right? This is true. So what happened is we end up sitting around talking about our troubles. We sit around talking about how this person wronged us, and oh yeah, man, I was in a relationship with someone like that too, and oh yeah, you wouldn't believe it, oh yeah. And we end up, it's almost like who can have the worst story wins. Like our traumas become like badges of honor. Yeah, but nobody suffered like me. And this comes out of millennia of pain and suffering, right? Whoever had it worst, that's a bad story. I can't beat that. And the problem is in families, it's almost like because we only can get juice from being the victim. If we actually kind of step up and we're like, you know what, it's okay. People will be like, well, you obviously had it really good. Or, you must have just had life given to you on a silver platter. If you'd suffered like I'd suffered, you wouldn't be able to say stuff like that. Like it's like that crabs in the bucket thing. We just keep pulling people back down into the drama triangle. Don't you dare get out of there, because you know what? If you're not hurting, you will be soon. Like, this is a very big deal. Like, if you go to a family gathering and everyone's just talking about, well, you wouldn't believe what happened now. You wouldn't believe it, and it's literally like a badge of honor. And whoever has been oppressed the most wins. Well, if that's what we know from a child, we don't even know we took this training, right? We don't even know that we're doing it, right? Then all of a sudden we are literally, what are we going to see in the world? As we walk through the world, we are going to be gathering badges of honor. We're literally going to tell every story like a drama like a victim story, because those are the badges. And this isn't everybody, but in many, many families, this is one of the reasons we get stuck in the victim persona. But this is my story. I am a cancer survivor. I'm a rape survivor. I am a survivor of whatever. And it's like, and? One of my favorite stories is about Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl was an Austrian Jewish psychologist during the Second World War. And he ended up in the concentration camps, Dachau and Auschwitz and a couple others. And after he escaped. And after the war was over, he said it was very interesting because people who survived the death camps either went one way or the other. They spent the rest of their life drunk, depressed, never getting over how victimized they were. And in the land of victims, holy mackerel, right? Like, it's pretty tough to pop out of that victim drama triangle, right? It's like, that's pretty heavy victimization. But again, the problem is, if we maintain that perspective, what happens to our life? And he said, the first group never got out. Even though they were free, they weren't free. They lived in those camps for the rest of their life. And they couldn't get out. Other people were so incredibly thankful to survive because they saw so many people die. They were like, you know what? I got a second chance. I'm going to do all these things and I'm going to live life and I'm going to do everything I ever wanted to do and I'm going to kiss my kids and I'm going to lick dogs and okay, that's gross. But I'm going to just do anything I possibly can to enjoy life because I'm out. Same stories, same experience, two different perspectives, right? Like, we're not taking away the fact that bad things happen. The question is, what do we want to bring forward in our life from there? And that's the whole point. So we have to be really careful about that in families. We just have to be really clear, like, is that something that's running inside of me? Like, if I went to my family and I said, things are really going well, doing all these great things, stuff like that, could they even respond? Would they even know how to ask questions? Would they even know how to have a conversation about amazing things that are happening? And again, this isn't about demonizing our family, just to be aware how deep the programming might be inside, and then to make sure to go out and find community of people who are doing things. Because those are people who will be interesting to talk to. People who are creating, people who are manifesting things in their life. Because those people you will have better conversations with than the ones that are just wanting to commiserate in all of our sob stories about all the reasons we can't do this and we can't do that. Like, it is so impossible to listen to if you're someone who goes out and makes things happen, right? The other challenge about being a victim and the difficulty of getting out of it is one of the reasons staying in the victim mentality has so much pull is we get so much attention, right? We are that heroine or hero or whatever, not the hero, but the victim or whatever, in the movie. We get the focus. And if we can stay in the victim mentality, then we get to be the one telling the story. We get to be the one that's always oppressed. And then everybody can have compassion for us. And they can pity our situation and realize how strong we are for continuing in this difficult situation. Like, you can feel all the emotion in this, right? Because you have to care about me. You have to have compassion for where I am. Or else are you like a monster? Right? But it's always interesting if you hang out, and I've hung out with a lot of people who aren't in this victim triangle for a long time, and they just sort of look at you and they say, then why are you there? And then you have to go and tell a story about all the people who have oppressed you and why you feel victimless, or why you still can't do it and you're powerless and you can't do it, and you have to tell this big story about why you must stay and continue in this horrible situation. And the person who's not in the victim triangle, you can't even hear it. It doesn't even land, because you're just like, that's just another victim story. Why does that hold power over you now? You're not there anymore. And maybe there's still woundings, right? We don't ask someone to run a marathon who's still got a broken leg, but then we got to fix the leg, right? We have to do the fixing, and we go, wow, okay, I'm really stuck here. Maybe I still have some deep wounds inside that need healing. Or maybe as a child, I only got attention from my family if I was being victimized. Or if something bad was happening to me, then my parents would rise up and protect me. Or they would rise up and soothe me, or something. And then we can sit and quietly look at that and say, okay, here's something that happened in my childhood. Well, then I need to do that for me now. Right? We're adults now. Right? We're not asking a 12-year-old to do this. We're adults. So if I need protection, then I need to protect me. This is self-actualization. Right? This is the journey of our soul, finding balance, finding strength, finding the freedom to manifest whatever it is that this soul is here to manifest. Right? So we become our protector. If we need to be loved by somebody, we need to love ourselves. We need to do that. That's our journey. That's our journey. If we don't love our inner self, our feminine, our inner child and all that, no one else can either. Right? We wouldn't accept it anyway because we don't do it. We're going to bounce it back every time anyway. All of this is our journey. It has nothing to do with anyone else. And the last reason I want to talk about, and this is really hard to say, right? Because again, this is really deeply embedded into our culture. One of the last big reasons that we stay in the victim mentality is because it frees us of responsibility to make change, right? To take action. If I'm a victim, like there's nothing I can do. It's just always going to be like this. No matter what I do, nothing's going to change anyway. And if I tell myself that often enough, I never have to dig deep inside of myself and find that courage to make change. Everything is someone else's fault. I am a firm believer that we come in alone and we go out alone. And every experience that we have in the middle with other people are all about that soul's journey. And it's never about anyone else. It's always about it's sort of like that same thing that, when we go back to the Hollywood movies, that the goal of every movie is to watch the redemption of the human spirit. Our human spirit. We want that person to find the courage to tell that person to stick it. We want to watch that person find the courage to overcome the things that have oppressed them. Right? That's our journey. And but it's hard. That's not easy. Right? That's a difficult journey. Following truth, no matter what, whether people understand it or not, overcoming our challenges by trusting the truth we hear inside of us and then taking the leap of faith to take action, that's like half of our talks here on Insight Timer. Right? Because it's hard. And then just as we try to do it, we do it and we go, whew, and we feel stronger. Then something new comes and we get a new challenge. And again, that is a whole other perspective as well. You know, my son was on yesterday. He was here and he was talking about Hercules. Somebody asked him what his favorite god or goddess or his favorite myth was. And he personally identified the most with Hercules. And the reason, and I don't know this story, so I'm just repeating what he said, was that Hercules was given 10 challenges. And he had to overcome them. And he said, but it was all about perspective. Because in many ways, he had pissed off this goddess. So she had thrown these 10 things at him to kind of break him. So we can look at the world like that. Look at all these things being sent to break me. But what makes Hercules Hercules, right? The Herculean challenges of life is that he saw them as personal challenges to make him stronger. And every challenge made him stronger and stronger and stronger until he was Hercules. Right? It's all perspective. You know? So some of the things we can do is, one, we have to embrace courage. In every step, we can ask ourselves the question, if we sit there and we say, but I'm afraid to make that choice, then you can close your eyes and you can say, all right, what would courage do? What would I do if I had courage right now? Say it out loud, do something. And then let that float in your ethers for a while. Let that dance. You don't have to solve it right away, but let that dance in your reality. Because the problem is when we're stuck in the victim mentality, the only thing floating in our ethers are all the things we can't do and all the things that everyone else has done to harm us. And that's our whole world. That's the whole soup that we are swimming in. And we start to think it's the whole world. But when we start inserting other possibilities. What would I do if I was courageous about this? And so like in the levels of consciousness of David Hawkins' book, above courage is neutrality, willingness, acceptance, love, wisdom. What would wisdom do? What would willingness do? Well, willingness, of course, assumes neutrality, that you're not blaming the other person, and you're willing to take the next step. And just to start, right, you can write it down, you can journal about it, you can talk about it, you can do whatever, but to start having those conversations and allow the ethers around you to start to shift, right? Just let them start to have these other thoughts, and then you'll start to have different conversations. If you find yourself in a family where the victim mentality is monstrous, right? And that's where, the badge of honors and that some people are really mean. We are not taught kindness. And even if people are trying to be kind, they're still not kind because they're passive aggressive and they're judgmental and all these things. So part of the courage might be putting up boundaries and to say, yeah, that's not going to happen. And if you say, oh no, I couldn't do that, I can't because it's my mom. Why not? Why is it okay for your mother, the person who brought you into the world, to treat you badly? Why? It kind of comes back to that phrase that Aaron, my son, said yesterday, that they say, that blood is thicker than water. But what the actual saying is that the blood of the coven is thicker than the water of the womb, or is stronger than the water of the womb. Right? Just because we were birthed from someone doesn't mean they get to abuse us. Just because someone's a sibling and came from the same litter as us doesn't mean they get to be mean to us. What's that all about? And again, we just look at it. We just look at it straight up, and it has no power over us. And then we start making choices. And then that victim cycle starts to get wobbly. It's not holding the same power anymore. And again, eventually it gets wobbly enough that it has no power at all. Like, this isn't like an overnight fix, because we have to start inserting different thoughts and different actions into our life. Another big way to get out of this mentality is that we have to find new ways of having excitement in our life, right? One of the reasons the victim triangle is so juicy is that it's exciting. We get a chemical hit. This is, I don't know, like the cocaine of the drama world or something. It's exciting. Well, if that's the only thing that's exciting in our life, guess what we're not going to let go of? So we need to find new sources of excitement. We need to find our edge. For me, I am so, like right now, for example, my life's super busy. Super, super, super busy. And sometimes I feel like I'm always sort of surfing this ocean of possibilities, and I'm just hoping that I'm actually doing enough to make sure all the dials are turning that need to turn, because things just kind of flood in of things I want to always be doing. For me, this is the adrenaline rush of life. To do things, you don't know if it's going to work out, you don't know if it's going to fail, or if it's going to be the greatest success of your life. That is an adrenaline rush for me. And I never know if something's going to turn out or not. To perpetually act in faith, to perpetually sit quietly in meditation and have an idea, and the idea tickles you. You're like, well, that would be fun. Right? You know what I did last week? I was frustrated editing my book. And I love dancing. And I bought a car, so I'm not getting quite as much exercise walking the pooch as I used to. And I love belly dancing, and I've taught belly dance for a long time, but I've also been really drawn to hula. So I found this great program called Hot Hula Fitness or something. And I bought their home study program, and it turns out that it was a home study teacher program. So as soon as my book is on its way, I'm going to start training to teach hot hula fitness. This entertains me like nobody's business. This is so fun. And then suddenly, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to travel to Tahiti and do a workshop in hula dance. And then maybe I'll go to Hawaii, or then maybe I'll travel and teach hot hula fitness to fun women or men all over the world. You know how much fun that is? I'm like so tickled by this hot hula fitness program I have loaded into my computer that I'm going to learn. That's exciting. I'm not going to sit around whining about anything, because I've got to learn about hot hula fitness. This is super fun, right? Like, can you imagine? And then you do this thing and it starts to expand, right? And then all of a sudden you guys are all like, hey, would you come to my town and teach us hot hula fitness? And then we'll have a Tantra class, and then we'll do union. And then the world starts to explode like this, right? What if that was what our life was? And you said, well, I really love this and I love this. And you start to explore those things, and all of a sudden you meet somebody and you take an art class, and the person beside you is really cool and they're having a gathering, and then you meet 3 other people. And next thing you know, your world has expanded into all these fantastic things, right? You're getting juice from living, from creating, from new things, from learning, from this. Is so much fun, right? We need to have this in our life, or we are going to keep falling down and just juicing on the drama. This is such a great big wide world. There are so many things we could be doing, like really fun things we could be doing, right? This is so important to have these things in our life. Because then suddenly, if someone comes over and they're like, hey, what's new? You're like, oh my God, so I'm doing this hot hula fitness and I've got this thing and da 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 da. So then I had to go buy all these outfits and then I had to do this thing and then I had to rent this hall because I'm doing this thing. And then I'm having the chick weekend and I'm going to do this. Yeah, da da da. And that's what I'm talking about. Right? That's my passion. That's the expansion. I'm going to leave it there. And I'm going to put my glasses on. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. When someone needs comfort, it seems natural to tell the story to heal. So where do you draw the line on not giving into the drama and still comforting them? I find the big difference is how many times have they told this story, right? If someone is, if you've had something buried inside of you your whole life, and all of a sudden, in a moment of safety with a friend, a story comes out. Wow, that's so important. And you can feel it, right? You can feel that this is a true vulnerability, a raw something that is rising. But when someone is telling the story for the 10th time, 20th time, 100th time. Sometimes it's the 20th time to you, right? And what's always interesting is there's this fine line between listening and being compassionate and then saying, so what do you think a good next step is? Right? I mean, they're talking to you. So you must be a part of this conversation. So the next question is, what's the next logical step, right? Thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a wonderful day.